Hello, friends! Welcome to episode 77 of Storyteller Conclave. This is a show all about helping you run the best tabletop role-playing game that you can. Whether you're a new storyteller or dungeon master learning the craft, or an experienced storyteller that's looking to take your game up to the next level. I am Sara.
And I'm Rob.
How we doing, Rob?
You know what? After that, I'm doing pretty good.
Yeah, it's quite a pick-me-up, actually.
Thank you. I saw that Arcane Anthems had some new, had finally put his parody stuff up, or their parody stuff up, and I was like, let me grab this just to see how many tracks we have. And I was like, there's a lot. But they're all like 1 minute, and I'm like, you know, I'll try and find like a good smattering to throw up there. And I think they were fun enough, and people would recognize a bunch of those. Some of the songs he's got, I don't know because I'm not like a poppy person.
Yeah.
But there's I think like 20 tracks that he put up, and they're free. You can go grab them off Arcane Anthems on their Patreon page, and I highly recommend it. He's also got the actual names of the songs in there if you're like, oh, I know that song, but I don't remember what it's called.
Right. There was a couple of them for me, yeah.
Yeah, whereas I recognized, I was like, wait a second, I know this song. So, but I just thought I'd throw something a little different today, and and for those who are catching the podcast, and don't get the intro because we slice it off if you're doing it later, I will be posting them up on our site and a link to the Arcane Anthem so you can grab those parodies. They are a bunch of fantastic D&D versions of songs and parodies, and they're very short. They're like a minute 5 at most, and they're fantastic. They're very well done.
Yeah, definitely go take a look up there if you're interested at storytellerconclave.com.
Yep.
Will you see them up there?
Yeah.
So this is episode 77.
Yeah.
So God, it seemed like we did our 50th like just yesterday.
It feels like we were 1 year into this like yesterday.
Yeah.
And like I went. It was actually when we were talking to somebody. I'm not going to say who, because we don't know what's going to happen with that yet. They were asking us like some questions about the show. And we were like, "Oh yeah, this, and we've been doing this for this long. Oh God,
oh my God, it's been like a year and a half now."
Yeah,
so
yeah. I was really surprised. Looking back at it all. But it's been fun, and we've done a lot, and we've got these miniseries, and it always amazes me that no matter how many times we either revisit something or I take a look at something, I learn something new or remember something that I do naturally again that I don't think about.
Yeah.
Or I do something that helps me in my next game. And it's great. And that's what the whole purpose is, not only to help each other remember to do these things and to keep us moving through all of this, but also to just be helpful to other people who are getting started, because it's so easy to lose sight of the fact that there are brand new DMs out there who have no idea what they're doing, who look at the books and see the dauntingness, but also feel the excitement, and we want to keep that excitement going.
Right.
So
I was actually talking to somebody online the other day, and they were saying to me like, oh hey, I heard you did a podcast, and it's about gaming and whatnot. And I said, oh yeah, you should give it a listen. It's about how to basically be a good storyteller. And he's like, oh, it's probably way over my head. I'm like, buddy, this is exactly the reason we were doing this.
Yeah. Yeah.
Absolutely. There's no entry fee. Get in here. So
yeah, I want to always emphasize that this is ground level stuff. That yes, we're cutting these shows into little big pieces so that you can examine different parts of them. But it should never feel like it's over your head. And if it does, please let us know. We'll take it back a notch if we need to.
By all means. And this is why we encourage people to get on our Discord too.
Very much so.
So you can engage with us personally.
And each other.
Drop questions in there. No question is too newbie-ish or anything like that. Like there's no such thing in my mind.
Yep.
We all had to start somewhere. We've got other new storytellers that are on the Discord who are interested in just entry level stuff of like, I'm running my first D&D game. This is my session 3. How do I handle this?
Yeah. Did I get myself in too far?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And I will say we are far more approachable than a lot of shows because we actually have this accessibility, and I want people to be able to use that.
Yeah, absolutely.
So we have a continuation of our current show where we're talking about our miniseries, I should say, which is talking about encounters in general. But this week we're going to dive into environmental and extended encounters. But just to reframe, since last week we kind of took a jump back to doing a review. We did Mech Warrior last week.
Battletech. Yep.
Battletech and Mech Warrior, yeah. But when we talk about encounters, we're talking about a meaningful scene that is not naturally part of plot, but is an encounter of some sort, a moment. Now, one of the things that we talk about in that is to make something a specific challenge or something to overcome, whether it's combat, social, exploration, interactive, that we're testing the players in some way. And there has to be 3 parts of that to make it really good. And these are things that that a lot of people go over, but Guy made a great job in his necessities for encounters, and that is there are stakes, options, and triggers. Mm-hmm. And when we're talking about stakes, we're talking about things that are not just life and death, but are for both sides, both the players and whatever the other side is, whether it's NPCs, environment, whatever. There should always be a stake at handling. Oftentimes it is death, but we want to try and roll back from that of just maybe it's honor, maybe it's money, maybe it's respect. Could be any number of things. Mm-hmm. You have your options, both on the player and the NPCs. They may not be prepared to attack the NPCs at this time. The NPCs may not be prepared to ambush the PCs at this time, but they may set up an option to do something else. They may, intimidation is a whole thing that takes time and presence to do something right. So you have to kind of play with that as well. And then you also have triggers, which is what does this trigger? Now, does this trigger something larger? Does it trigger a bar brawl? This simple social encounter? Does it trigger someone else noticing them that then leads into plot? Maybe it's a bardic competition that catches the eye of a lord who now wants to see them in their own home, and then that leads into more plot. Mm-hmm. There's always a reason and a trigger to step to the next thing. And we'll kind of get into that when we get into the environmental stuff as well. We'll kind of explain what kind of triggers can come off of those things to bring. Mm-hmm. Because anytime you have an encounter, there has to be a reason for it.
Yes.
Whether that reason is plot and story or character growth and discovery.
Yes. So we're talking tonight about environmental encounters. And the environmental encounters are kind of out of the scope of like your normal sort of encounters. I think your key to encounter types that we've already really talked about are your social encounters and your combat encounters. And combat encounters are usually like your big ones, especially because a lot of our players are Dungeons & Dragons players. Dungeons & Dragons is a very heavily combat-oriented game. So that's usually what you think of when you think of encounter design. Environmental encounters are a little bit different because they don't really have the traditional antagonist that a lot of other encounters do. It's not man versus man. It is essentially man versus environment. There is an obstacle that you are needing to overcome, and that is the environment itself. So some examples of this would be like traversing a treacherous swamp, climbing a mountain.
Yep, I would agree.
Weathering a severe storm.
Whether it be
rain
on
or
foot
blizzard
or
whatever. Clearing rubble from a rock slide.
That's a good one, yep.
Navigating a maze-like network of caverns.
I think that those are all perfect examples. And whenever we're dealing with something like that, it also can extend to other aspects of that. So it can be very simple. It can just literally be hunkering down. Like the environmental situation could be happening outside the doors of an old inn that your group has put themselves inside of. A lot of great role-playing and scenes can happen from within an environmental encounter. Keep that in mind. So you can have a whole social encounter that happens because of an environmental encounter. You can have triggers and events that are happening within there that are objects. One of the coolest things that I love seeing is the... I'm trying to think of the movie now. I think it's The Deadly Seven, where they're all trapped... Are basically from a snowstorm.
Okay.
And it's just a bunch of people and their circumstances that bring them there.
Oh, okay.
And how the situation gets resolved because of who's all in the room. Because you can have a situation where like, oh yeah, your guys are all hunkering down, but also inside this inn is a guard and two prisoners who have to be brought to trial. So now you're in this old decrepit inn that's been abandoned, and it's you and the three of them. Okay.
Yeah.
You got to survive the night.
You roll from a environmental encounter into a social encounter.
Yeah, and the environmental encounter is what's happening on the outside. So players who don't want to deal with the social one or need to step out from that, you now have that environmental range right there, and they know what the encounter is.
Right.
So don't think that this is a one-part thing or another. It can be multiple, and that's why it can be a persistent encounter that makes up the scene.
So I think that the big thing about determining what is an environmental encounter, what makes it an encounter and not just a place that something takes place, is environments, they're obviously going to shape all of our encounters. The story always has to take place somewhere.
Agreed.
You know,
for me, it's that I always see in an environmental encounter, the environment is its own NPC.
Exactly.
It is putting pressure on the events.
The environment is an active participant in the encounter itself.
Correct.
Or, in fact, the only obstacle to get to conquer.
Excuse me.
So environmental encounters, they require a suitably epic scale too. Like, you can't just it's raining outside is not an environmental encounter. Like, there is a blizzard that blacks out all, or I should say whites out all sight, past 10 feet. And you are in a mountain pass. The snow is piling up high, and with every loud noise that occurs, you see little avalanches coming down the side of the mountain, which makes you afraid to do anything, major or loud or to shake anything loose.
Mm-hmm.
That is an environmental encounter. How are you going to make it through this mountain pass without either A, dying of exposure, or B, causing an avalanche and getting buried?
Mm-hmm.
Are you going to be able to do that in time? What are the stakes? Is there something you're trying to get to?
Yeah. How long do you have a time span?
Yeah. Is there a clock ticking on you getting through this mountain pass?
Right. Maybe it's just food.
Sure.
That's one of the things that I always see is that remember your stakes. If it's survival, it doesn't necessarily mean death, but it does mean dwindling resources.
Mm-hmm.
And literally, you can start off the whole encounter by literally your survivalists, whoever's got the highest level of survival, opening their pack. Not even having them do a roll, just you open your pack and look inside as the wind howls and you say, there's only 3 days worth of provisions in here.
Yeah.
After that, we've got to hunt. And looking around, there is nothing to hunt in this storm.
Yep. Because no, you're the only fools, stupid enough to be out in it.
Mm-hmm.
I used to play Skyrim quite a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And after a while, I got into the modding community.
Mm-hmm.
And I loaded up a mod called Frostfall.
Mm-hmm.
And
I remember you talking about this.
Frostfall was, and I also had another mod called Realistic Needs. And so the two of those together added in the need to eat, drink, sleep, and then Frostfall added in weather conditions and things like hypothermia, and the need to find shelter and warm yourself by fires and such like that. It would go all the way to starting to slow your character and blurring your screen as you slowly started to freeze to death. And it was really neat. And I remember playing around with this a little bit. And at one point, I was up in the if anybody knows Skyrim, up in the northwest corner in the city of Windhelm, and I decided I was going to walk to the city of
the bay.
No, sorry, I was in Winterhold. I needed to walk to Windhelm.
That's what I thought. Yeah.
And it's really not. It's not that terribly far. Windhelm is basically just a little bit south of Winterfell, but I remember getting about halfway there and starting to freeze, and then I realized that there was no shelter around, and it started to become a little bit desperate, and I got attacked by some wolves, and then I found a little cave, but I couldn't get any further into the cave because there was a special locked door there,
mm-hmm.
and the little dinky torches that were in there weren't warming me up any.
Yeah.
And so it was really just forestalling my hypothermia.
Yeah.
And then I eventually decided to just make a run for it.
Right.
And I was frostbitten all to hell when I got to when I finally got to Windhelm, and I came in around the wrong side of the north end of the town.
Okay.
The entrance is on the south side, and then along the east side there's a bay. There's a port, water.
It's water, yeah.
And what happens when you're in subarctic temperatures and you dive in the water?
Hypothermia.
Instant hypothermia.
Right.
And I thought I could make this jump, and I didn't. And I landed in the water, and I almost died.
Trying to get into town.
Just trying to get into town. And the reason I'm telling the story is because I literally walked and fought some wolves.
Yeah.
And that was it.
But it was exciting.
But that was some of the most fun I have ever had playing Skyrim in my entire life.
Yeah.
Because the stakes were so high,
mm-hmm.
all of a sudden, the environment itself didn't just become a bunch of like pretty pictures around me. It became my adversary.
Yeah.
You know, everything around me, every step I took was vital. And, you know, I think it's that sort of excitement you can get out of environmental encounters if you do them right.
And I think that's what you're talking about, is how that encounter transpired, what challenges were there, and how those challenges were constantly met with a level of excitement and a level of concern. You knew the risks. The risks stacked. So the costs were getting higher and higher. And so it was like, are we going to go? So it feels like a combat encounter gone sideways.
Oh, it does.
Where you're like, you're confident at the beginning of this that we're going to do just fine. And as you're slowly whittled down, you're like, this is not.
There's that tipping point where you go, oh, God, I might not do this.
Right.
You know?
Like, what's going to happen next? Like, if I don't survive this, am I going to, in your case, am I going to have to go all the way back? Am I going to respawn at the old place? Oh, crap. Like, how am I going to get to the new place? Like, I can't travel. Like, that's the whole thing.
Well, I got to prepare better, you know?
Right. But I think leaning into the atmosphere is a big part of that. And that is part of the environmental encounters, is understanding the atmosphere of the area so that you can create the sounds, the feel, the words that are necessary so that people know what is going on around them.
It's a really great place because you don't have all the distraction of like combat mechanics and stuff like that. It's a really great place to like throw in some dramatic music. If it's appropriate, throw in some props. I've seen storytellers use like hourglasses where they, you know, if it like there's an immediacy to what's going on, you know, you've got 1 minute to decide what your character does. Go, you know.
Yeah.
That can be a little high pressure for some groups, so use that one at discretion. But
yeah, I'd heavily concern yourself with your group about timing, because I know certain players don't think well
under pressure. Yeah, and that can detract from the fun. But if you do have one of those groups that enjoys that sort of thing, that's something you can do. You know, but get really descriptive with what is going on in the environment. Really get your players to feel what the environment is like, so that they can be there and be present in it and feel every bit of it.
So what else?
So another thing, and this is kind of goes back to where you don't have a bunch of combat mechanics bogging down the gameplay and such like that. You can really give your players the chance to shine. Environmental encounters are not cut and dry.
No.
You know, they're not. There's very rarely ever like any solid rules for how to run them in a game system. And so what you can do is you can kind of play a little fast and loose with the character's skills, maybe the character's backgrounds, maybe some of the weird esoteric pieces of equipment they've got sitting in their bags. Like, I noticed when I was going over Ravana's character sheet, my wizard in your game, that I have a hunting trap in there.
Yep.
Now, if we got caught out in a blizzard, obviously, first off, Ravana would be fine.
Yeah.
But second off, if we needed to forage for food, I've got a hunting trap in there. Whenever would I ever use that hunting trap, other than maybe like if we were stranded out in the middle of nowhere and needed to catch something?
Yeah. And a point to be made there is, Ravana would be fine, but if she had 4 popsicles that she had to handle,
they'd be screwed. Yeah.
And then if something came and attacked, you only have so much magic.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
So,
and it starts tilting the scale really quick. And so a very easy encounter can become very complicated very quickly.
One of the things that I thought was funny was there was somebody who had written about a mountain encounter, and one of the players had the ability to fly. They had the spell fly. So they weren't concerned about about falling and you know, whatever off the mountain. So they were climbing, and like every time that they would have a problem there, like each day they would just cast flight and handle it. Well, they finally did get to an environmental encounter where there was high winds. And so the players are using the ropes and their pitons. This person is not. You know, they're holding the ropes and stuff, but they're not, you know, they're like, I can fly. It's not that big of a deal. Until the wind has a force. So now they're off the edge of the cliff, blown around like a rag doll, because they have nothing to hold on to except the rope. And so they have to hold on to that rope or just be launched.
And it just becomes a strength check.
Right. And the other group is trying to keep them closer to the mountain, because at some point in the day, that's going to go away. And they're going to fall.
Yep. Absolutely.
Yeah, and one of the greatest lines that came out of that was, tie it around your waist. Why? So we can find your body when you fall and slam into the rocks. You stupid wizard. And that was the answer.
Yep. But like little things that your characters can use. I mean, aside from obviously like the traps or their flight spell or something like that, you might have a massive survival check on your character for the ranger or the druid. Use that. The wizard, with their massive intelligence and possibly eidetic memory, might remember the complicated pattern of the maze in the caverns and be able to navigate them.
Yeah.
This isn't a dungeon. It's not traps or anything like that.
Yeah.
But like sometimes caverns just wind really weird. You
Yeah.
know? A frost-resistant character might be the only one who's able to venture out into the blizzard.
Yeah.
To find food.
But they may not be the best fighter.
But they may not be the best fighter. Exactly.
Or the best at picking things.
So, you also want to really reward ingenuity.
Yeah, I agree.
Because again, these aren't really encounters where you have like, set rules for them. These are just kind of things you're going to be kind of making up on the fly to allow the players to showcase their skills. So if the players are like, we all know if you've run more than one game of any game whatsoever, okay, you know that no matter how well you think you've got your campaign planned, your players are going to come up with something that is completely off left field from what you thought they were going to do, and they're going to try to execute it.
Yeah, totally.
This is a place where you can absolutely let them do that.
I would agree. I would totally agree.
This is a great place to let them come up with wacky, off-the-wall suggestions. If it's even close to reasonable, let them do it.
Yeah.
Because two things are going to happen. First off, this is going to reward them for their ingenuity, and it's going to make them feel really great for coming up with that, and it's going to create a lot of lasting memories.
Yeah.
Your players are going to walk away from that table not remembering the time that they thought they had a good plan and the DM said no. They're going to remember that time that they came up with that one plan and it worked and pulled their bacon out of the fire. And it was awesome, and they're going to be high-fiving each other.
Another thing that I want to put on that ingenuity is not just solving their way out of the problem, but also coming up with side play. And that's where players can sometimes really get crazy with their ideas. For instance, if they're at that inn, and one of the players is just like, looks at, says, are there cups and stuff? I'm like, yeah, there's like old tankards and things. They're a little dirty and such, but they could get cleaned up with like a rag. All right. Marcus, yeah. You know that princess you've been trying to court? Yeah. Let's say she's come to a bar. We're going to help you with your courtmanship. And like the rogue gets up and like, hey, hold on a second. He pulls out a wig, puts it on, sits down at the bar. Oh, I wonder if I can get a drink here. And they do a whole scene on their own. Let them roll with that. Let them role play it out. Because that's the kind of stuff you want to see in your game, is where your players are playing with each other, that they're creating the story with them. And that you can add elements into that scene, give them props, give them moments, flavor it up a little bit, and then let that situation move forward, but let it still be an environmental encounter as well. That's part of what's going on in that scene, so that they feel that you didn't just leave them hanging to do their own thing, that there's still elements of the world touching in there, and that NPC that is the environment is still alive and kicking until they're done with the scene. But let them run with it. Let them have some fun with it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Let them get into an argument between characters about things. Let them, start things off with how upset they are about the previous fight, the way it went. Or maybe someone stole something that they shouldn't have stole. Maybe not from their own group, but maybe somebody else's. You get things like that happening in closed spaces. People get tight with their words, and that can sometimes make for a lot of ingenious ideas.
I remember telling the story before of Ravana's introduction to the party, where she was hired as a mountain guide specifically to get through wintry areas like that up in the mountains. And the first thing she did was, and mind you, this is dealing with the king of the elves and her consort. First time this little peasant girl is dealing with royalty. And she says, all right, everybody go get your cold weather gear and stand here in the middle of the, come meet me in the middle of the courtyard in 15 minutes. So everybody goes and gets bundled up. She comes back and she says, okay, is everybody bundled up the way that you would be, the way that you're going up into the north? Yes, we are. All right. And she casts Sleet Storm on them. And that's all that I did. And of course, every player in the group took it upon themselves to roleplay what would happen if they just got caught in a sleet storm. So, one of our friends is going, "Oh, fluff, that was, what the heck was that? Ah, that was awful." I'm like, "Oh, are you miserable? Yeah, then you need better gear."
Mm-hmm.
And I walked off.
Yep.
I mic dropped and walked off.
Yep.
And they were like, oh, she's right.
Mm-hmm.
Gosh darn it. I was like, because that was 5 seconds of the worst stuff that you're going to have every other day up where we're going.
Yep.
And then all these games later, we get up into those mountains finally.
Mm-hmm.
And same character complaining about being cold. And what did I do? I reminded that character, we talked about this.
Mm-hmm. It's been a bit, but you talked about this.
It's been a bit, but we talked about this.
Indeed you did. Indeed you did.
So, you get memorable role-playing experiences out of those.
Totally.
All right, so lastly, the thing you need to remember, and we talked about this before, of the stakes, is, consider the consequences of the environmental encounter.
Right.
Okay? Environmental encounters are encounters because they have the ability to alter the story.
Right.
Otherwise, they're just a scene.
Correct.
Okay? They require some input from the characters. They require some challenges that may or may not pass.
Mm-hmm.
And the success or failure of those things may alter the story. So, like any other type of encounter, you definitely want to have stakes for your failure. Typically, these aren't going to be as dire as combat encounters, but you could die if things go poor enough. I don't know. I mean, it depends on how bad you want your encounters go. Some examples of good consequences for environmental encounters. Maybe failure to navigate the swamp in an efficient way leads you into combat encounters you would have otherwise avoided.
Mm-hmm.
And that expends time and resources and potentially puts you in danger of dying, depending on how those combat encounters go.
Right. Or it brings you closer to people that you weren't prepared to see.
Exactly. Maybe failure to get through the snowy mountain pass in time loses you 2 days of travel while you're snowed in. So you need to shelter down.
Mm-hmm.
You consume some resources and such like that, but that's 2 days that you're not there, and you can't deliver a vital message in time, or you can't come to someone's aid in time.
Right. So instead of coming to the town just as they're being attacked, you come in a day
to
after.
The wreckage of the attack.
Right.
Yep. And people demanding to know, where were you?
Yep.
Maybe being unable to navigate the storm at sea throws you off course and requires you to detour to replenish dwindling supplies so you don't perish at sea.
Or worse yet, you have to go steal supplies.
Mm-hmm.
Because
so
you're
much
in
food and water.
You're in a hazardous area, and well, it's either plunder another ship, or or go port at a very, very sketchy place.
Tortuga.
That's right.
Tortuga. Now, some of you may notice, too, that, I know we mentioned this earlier, is that environmental encounters dovetail very nicely with combat encounters.
They can be just another NPC.
They can complicate an existing encounter, or they can lead into a combat encounter.
Correct.
In favor of or against the PCs.
Mm-hmm.
I want that very clear. Sometimes an environmental encounter actually aids the PCs.
Mm-hmm.
And there's our turtle reference Knox pointed out.
Yep, sure.
So, for instance, more of an add-on to a combat encounters than strict environmental encounter. You can factor them kind of together. Having combat take place during inclement weather conditions, like in harsh environments, can change a routine combat encounter into a memorable one.
Yeah, so, I mean, you could have a boarding action between two ships that seems, relatively perfectly normal. But what happens if it happens in the eye of a storm?
Uh-huh.
Or between two ships that are literally frozen on a lake that's now breaking because it's, so you've got ice down below, but it also may be frozen water, so anybody who falls off the ship may break through the ice and never be seen.
I haven't break through the ice, but just hitting ice-cold water like that is a danger in and of itself. We talked about instant hypothermia earlier. Yeah.
Space is another thing that we don't really talk about much, but space encounters in ships or airlocks or areas like that where if something goes through the wall, you're both staring at it and not very happy with that tiny hole growing.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
You're losing oxygen. You can
you.
hear the oxygen alert going off.
Every EVA is an environmental encounter.
Yeah, I think that what's the Expanse?
The
does a
Expanse,
great job of environmental encounters affecting combat encounters. Because space,
a ship blew up nearby. In 3 turns, that's going to be a shrapnel storm.
Correct.
Right.
Correct. Yeah. And that was another thing is that think of a battlefield that the group is moving through as an environmental encounter.
Yeah, that's an
so if
environmental
you've got to get
encounter,
from point to point and there's a battle going on around you, that's an environmental encounter. So
because arrows going to be flying, stray
debris,
swords,
walls falling down,
siege weapons,
maybe siege gear.
Yeah.
Random spells.
Uh-huh.
Oh yeah, someone's casting Sleet Storm.
There's a great scene. You remember the movie Children of Men?
Vaguely.
It's a really really great movie, and there's a 9-minute long scene, I want to say, that was done in one cut.
Oh,
I just that's one of my my things. Like I love amazing takes like that in cinematography. But the entire thing essentially is who is the star of that movie? It's on the tip of my tongue, but somebody in the live chat. Who was the star of Children of Men? Clive Owen.
okay.
Clive Owen. Never mind. Got it. Thank you, live chat. Where Clive Owen is essentially just trying to traverse a battlefield.
Yes. Okay.
It's 9 minutes of environmental encounter.
Yeah.
Because there's gunfire he's got to dodge by. Nobody's trying to shoot him necessarily.
Yeah.
There's just a fight.
There's
and
no
he's trying to
primary
move
protagonist
through it.
or antagonist that's shooting at him or anything like that. It's literally just a battlefield.
It's just a battlefield. There's explosions going off. There's gunfire going off. There's collapsed buildings that he's got to climb through, things like that. It's a perfect example of an environmental encounter. Absolutely.
And the other thing that I like in other stories, for instance, if you take something like Shadowrun, if you're inside of an apartment building having a gunfight with somebody, there are other people who live in that apartment complex, and you're going to have to deal with that. Plus, you might have to deal with stairwells and broken up other things and buildings and parts and stuff falling around. That happens.
Yes, it does.
That's going to happen around you. And another thing is if you're chasing someone through a town, an environmental encounter is the town.
Is the crowded streets. Is the alleyways.
Yeah.
Is the
Assassin's Creed does that really well as a game, is that as you're trying to chase someone down, you may be moving from building to building or across things, and there are just people there. And you have to get through those people to get to where you're going. So
now, keeping in mind also that smart enemies will also use the environment to their advantage. Sneaky foes may come in during darkness or fog or obscuring rain. Foes that are suited to cold weather may attack during the blizzard. Aquatic or amphibious foes may ambush in a wet environment and use their mobility through the water and their ability to breathe underwater to their advantage. Think of like those Navy SEALs, scenes you see where like all of a sudden silently they just come up from the blackness of the water and they're there.
Yep.
You can do a lot of great things.
you can.
And remember, those of you playing Dungeons and Dragons, undead don't breathe.
Yep.
You can hide them under lakes and rivers indefinitely.
Yeah, I think that there's a lot of great scenes in movies that we forget about with the sirens who draw people to the water and then the souls that take them under. And all you gotta do is grapple. That's it.
Yep. And
Well-
that water becomes a real big complication all of a sudden for you.
Water becomes scary.
I like the idea of like the fog or the darkness, using stealth encounters there.
Yeah.
But keeping in mind too, your heroes can do that as well.
Yeah.
Like you can have an environmental encounter or an environmental complication for a combat encounter where the heroes attack during fog. And it may harm your archer's ability to see, but like your rogue is going to have advantage on every stealth roll. The lizard folk that you've got in your group who's like, when am I ever going to use my water breathing? Well, guess what? If you design an encounter for them to, they're going to feel great about being all of a sudden some amphibious assassin for one whole scene.
Pulling people into the water and killing them silently
Yep.
with the rogue right next to them,
Just all of a sudden excels in that environment. Characters that can fly all of a sudden become really great when the floor is nothing but 3 feet of sucking mire in a swamp.
Yeah.
And it's difficult terrain for everybody. Everybody's slogging around.
Treetop to treetop fighting from really high acrobatic characters. Now you've got a scene where the ground is literally too sticky and movement is terrible because it's all wet and muddy and mucky, so it's all considered heavy terrain. that would slow you, and now you've got these very dexterous characters who are going limb to limb and moving through branches and trying to not fall from 30-foot tall trees, as also, as they move through an area that's trying to attack them.
Yep.
Spider attacks from up above.
Yep.
Because once you're underground, they're yours.
Exactly. Exactly.
But yeah, really neat stuff that you can do, and you had put in here the concept of making it cinematic, which I love. I love doing cinematic stuff.
Environmental encounters are cinematic as heck.
There was a neat scene that reminded me of that I wanted to pull off with you guys in the first season of my D&D game, where you were in an old castle. And the whole thing changed in the way you guys were doing it. That was Roos's place, where you guys kind of figured things out. And the whole mirrors thing came out of it. But one of the things was that there was going to be this hallway of doors and archways, old stone archway doors. And as you were going through, some of them were open and would lead into rooms. Some of them were closed off. And as you pass one of them, looking in, you'd see that the archway was a mirror. And you're like, oh, you could see yourself in it. Well, it's not. It's actually going to be a mystical illusion that would, as soon as someone came to the mirror, would draw them into the room.
Oh, yeah.
And so now you've got this whole grapple fight going on in the room of someone who looks like them, of a mirror image.
Yeah.
And so now you've got a whole problem with the group, like, okay, who's who?
I'm glad you brought up the mirror thing, because what I jotted down here in the notes is the Mirror Knight from Dark Souls 2.
Okay.
Now, I know a lot of people didn't play Dark Souls 2.
Right.
I played it. I loved it. But there's one fight in there against this character called the Mirror Knight, and or Looking Glass Knight. I think it's Mirror Knight.
Continue.
Regardless, though, it's a pretty run of the mill fight. He's just a big guy in armor with a sword. He's got a mirrored shield that can at certain points during the fight spits out illusions. That you have to also basically, they're ads on the fights. You just have to fight them too. But it's really nothing special. But what does make that encounter so epic is that this whole time you've been going through this castle, and when you finally get out onto this balcony where the Mirror Knight is, there is a thunderstorm going on. And so you're fighting this gigantic armored dude that is calling these mirror illusions out to fight you during this torrential downpour with these dramatic flashes of lightning and the music playing in the background. And all of a sudden now you're just like, yeah, this is awesome!
Yeah. The other thing is you can create an environment that is also for your PCs, meaning letting them know that they're succeeding by doing the same thing, whereas lightning flashes, and in the distance, which was now darkness as night, they see a figure standing there waiting, in a waiting position, and they're like, oh, they're here. The others are here, or a whole army that was approaching. When the lightning flashes again, they're gone.
Yeah,
they're just bodies litter that section of the field, and you're like, what the heck just killed all of those people over there? And then the light flashes again, and now you have an assassins group that you guys were good friends with just show up out of the darkness next to you for a moment, and then the lightning flashes, they're gone, and you're like, okay, you guys did your job, thank you so much.
Yep. All right, so we talked a lot about environmental encounters.
Yes.
So we also wanted to talk about extended encounters, because extended encounters are kind of akin to environmental encounters. Environmental encounters are basically just extended encounters that take place because of the environment.
Right.
Extended encounters, though, are more your generic things. A lot of times extended encounters are going to be initiated by the player party.
Right.
But they're basically just kind of those open-ended encounters where you ask for feedback from your group, allow them to flex their skills and to do a specific task. Okay. So what are we talking about? So we mentioned earlier, chasing a thief through busy city streets, forging a complicated magical weapon, navigating open waters on a ship, where everybody on the ship has to kind of do their own part, or executing an elaborate con or thieving job.
I'd also say, the A-team montages are a good one for that as well.
Yeah.
Where they're all working together to create a goal, to finish something off. Or a couple of day process. Well, we've got 5 days. can we defend this place? I don't know. Let's get the people involved, and you move through that extended scene.
Exactly. So these are supposed to be more like montage abstractions. Like, you're not really going to go on a turn basis like this. It's not a measured amount of time.
Right.
You might say the whole process takes like an hour or something like that, but like there's no set time for like what Rob's turn is or for what Sarah's turn is.
Yeah, it could be hours. It could be a whole day.
Right.
I mean, I did that for you guys when you went back to the city of Plunkerton, and you guys were like, well, we need to get this place up and running again and get the tribe back here. And I'm like, all right, let's do an extended scene. And I literally gave you each vignettes, and then you guys paired up as teams, and one of you would say what was going on, and the other one would say how it ended.
Yes.
And there were roles involved, whether it was successful or not.
And I thought that was great.
Yeah.
You gave us a chance to kind of speak something into the universe. So basically whatever we said went.
Relatively, yeah.
Within some certain reason. And then, it kind of became canon, so that they gave us a little bit of time to do some storytelling ourselves.
Yep.
There were some complications, there were some roles, but basically over the course of these montages, we kind of got this machine city back up and sort of running again.
Yep. With some people, some residents. Yeah.
And there was some good outcomes from that. So what makes these sort of things unique? So like I said, they're basically a lot like environmental encounters. They're a great place for your players to use their unique unconventional ways, or to showcase special skills that they have. Did the fighter always want to be a blacksmith? Did they write it in their character sheet or their backstory that they want to be a blacksmith? Well, guess what? Here's your chance. We're going to be smithing this weapon. Allow him to make the rolls for it, Is the rogue an ex-Thieves Guild member that knows the city streets blindfolded? Maybe he knows some hidden ways to cut off the target that you're chasing. Does someone have an extra reputation with the locals? Maybe they can call in favors to assist in the task in some way, cashing in good deeds that they've done in the past for tangible benefit. We go on these adventures all the time. We talk about reputation. This is a great way to kind of say, like, hey, we've got this reputation. Why don't we ask for some favors in return? Other than gold, maybe.
Right.
Maybe somebody can ask some questions for us. Maybe somebody can solve some problems for us. During these extended encounters, that's a great place to use this sort of thing.
I would agree. I've seen extended encounters used for travel, especially if it's multiple locations that are irrelevant. Like, hey, we know the map. Like, we've been here to here to here to here to here, and now we're way over on the other end of the map.
Yep.
We want to backtrack about a month and a half back to this town. Great. Yeah, you could just say it took you this long to travel there, but you could also do montages through that.
Sure.
And do an extended encounter through that scenario if you don't have anything particular that you want to deal with. It's just a matter of them getting to that point.
Absolutely. Absolutely. The stakes for extended encounters are generally a lot less dire.
Yeah.
Than like either your environmental encounters or obviously a combat encounter.
Right.
But you can, but again, these are still encounters. So you can still significantly alter the story through these encounters. For instance, forging a magical weapon with blacksmithing skills of the dwarf, the magical skill of the wizard, and the dexterity for precise rune carvings of the rogue. While the cleric prays for their endurance to get through the grueling 14-hour ritual without faltering. If the forging succeeds, the party has a new and potentially very powerful magical weapon. It might have a very specific purpose, specifically killing a god or something like that.
Right.
Or it might just be, hey, it's a new +1 keen longsword or something,
Sure.
But one way or another, though, they've done this encounter, they've put the work in, they've made this thing, and that's going to significantly alter the story in the future.
Right.
If it fails, nobody dies.
Right.
But maybe the party has wasted time. They've possibly wasted a rare magical component in the forging.
Yep.
They may have to go and get these sort of things again. It may just cost them more than gold.
Yep.
And like we said earlier, keeping in mind that like a montage or an abstraction like this means that it's not measured in discrete rounds. So the skill checks and the role playing that takes place over the course of a period of time, not in initiative order.
Right. There can still be losses, and keep in mind that in larger campaigns, when players have followers or they have they need guides or something else that maybe take them through an area, there's nothing to say that those people don't get injured and have their own sets of losses beyond the party. And that right there can feel like a weighted cost and can definitely be a reputational cost. Especially if it's, the group wants to get through this area. Okay, well, we're going to pay for guides and a caravan and guards and stuff. Great. You guys do all that. This is a dangerous area, and then you set up some survival roles. You do some ambush checks and things like that. And you say, yep, you guys made it. 2 of the caravans were burned, and you lost 6 of your 10 guards and 2 coach drivers and your cook, but you've made it.
Oh, those are some bad rolls.
Things happen.
Yeah.
And now those people are worried about that area. And in fact, stories are now being told about that journey, how perilous it was. And now some merchants won't even take that distance because of what happened.
Yep.
So there's all kinds of other forms of outcomes that you have to kind of keep in mind. And later on, somebody may see those players like, oh, you were involved in the Misshapen caravan that happened. Yeah. That costs a lot in our area. Why would you ever take that trick?
Right.
That was a risky thing to have done. And now the person who's your leader of your group, maybe trying to become a noble, is looked a little differently because they're risky.
Oh, we're going down that path? You mean the path of perils?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, exactly. Yep. Knocks on the box in the live chat, says, oh God, look, an Oregon Trail update from hell. I died of dysentery.
Yes.
All right, so how do you run extended encounters?
For me, it's a matter of setting up what the players are looking to do, if it is something that you're handing to them, giving them a base scenario of what the options are, and then letting them explore it, letting them have a little ingenuity and meta in it, and then developing very quickly what the requirements for each one of them might be.
Yes, exactly.
And setting basic thresholds. Sometimes games give you that very plainly. D&D does a pretty good job in most cases of doing it, but there's nothing to say that if players come up with the idea that they want to do something that's in the book that has a mechanic system that you just can't find, that you shouldn't just put something on the fly together. Work with standard challenge ratings and give them an option.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the other thing too is, again, this is a great place to allow them to be creative. Don't, obviously, if it's too far out of the box, you might want to incur some penalties because you want to use the right tool for the job, but don't penalize them for using ingenuity.
Right.
But if you try to pound in hammers or pound in nails with a fish, yeah, that's gonna be a pretty difficult task. That's not ingenuity at that point. That's just stupidity.
Right. But think again that not all groups are created equal, and not all situations. They're not going to be a perfect A team in the way that they do things.
Right.
But they may still get it done. So think about it: the difference between the A team and Three Amigos. Where they still defended the town and they got everything done that they needed to do because they used amigos, and had everybody and that's the kind of thing that can happen out of those scenarios. Is you can say, oh well, we want to do this to defend the town, and the town people are just a bunch of farmers and sewers. Like they make fabrics, and you're like, they do what now? And so maybe one of the players is a bard who has a lot of knowledge in clothing, like their family are clothiers. They're like, you can do what now? Do you have anything that's really light, like wispy, like a wraith? Yeah, we could definitely make something silky. I have an idea. And let them run. Yeah. You never know what you could come back with.
I would say during extended encounters like this, it's better to say yes than to say no. Because you're going to get some really memorable situations out of saying yes.
Exactly.
Keep the roles light and keep the role play and description heavy. Remember, this is an abstraction, okay? You don't need to bog the play down with minute details. One role per player is more than sufficient. Assume that everyone is doing their best to overcome the obstacles. So basically, someone says, okay, well, I want to go out and I want to explore the ruins of the city. I want to, look around to see if there's any machines that I can get up and running again, and maybe use my arcane knowledge to see, if I recognize the energy sources on them and power them back up. Okay. Now, some people would say, okay, give me a search check, or give me an investigation check, and give me a survival check, and give me an arcana check, and no, that's too much. One arcana check. It's good? Alright, cool. Here's your positive outcome. You recognize that the crystals are, in fact, arcane batteries.
Mm-hmm.
You get the machines whirring back up. You realize that they actually generate force fields. And that, now that you've recognized that, you can go around the town repairing these things, and boom, the ruins of the town now have this force field that can go up around it.
Yep.
Neat. One roll.
Yep.
It's just some role play.
Yep.
But it changed the story. It changed the environment. And it made the player feel good about their input there.
And it gives them also a visual of what they're finding.
Exactly. So just, allow them to describe how they want to give their input to the extended encounter, and then just make one roll based on it. 2 at absolute most, but honestly, I think 1 really suffices. Honestly, keep it light.
Yeah, a lot of people ask, especially for travel encounters, like how many survival checks should I be doing? How many, if they're getting ambushes, how much perception should I make these people be rolling? And realistically, what it comes down to is whatever makes your group happiest.
Mm-hmm.
So if your group is a dice group that that likes seeing successes and failures and what it means, make sure that each of your players gets a roll.
Mm-hmm.
If you've got someone who isn't contributing vocally, maybe it's just an off night for them. Maybe it's, maybe they're just a quiet person who really isn't light on their feet with ideas all the time. Maybe they don't matter, but they love the story and they love being there and they add a lot to the game just for being there. There's nothing to say that you can't ask them for a roll.
Mm-hmm.
And then explain with them how that adds to the group.
Exactly.
To keep them engaged. So with extended encounters and that type of thing, you can add those people back into the game, but you have to know a little bit about their character, and it's always good to have their character sheets in front of you.
Yes.
If you can, either digitally or physically, so that you can see what their abilities are to be able to push them into the game.
Mm-hmm.
And make sure that they're available. Last but not least, never forget that you can always add personal items to each one of these things, whether it's an extended or whether it's an environmental, to bring those characters into the game.
Yeah.
And make them feel like, oh, my character's here, not just my player.
Absolutely.
So.
No, keep in mind, group successes. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
so everybody may be contributing their own individual roles and stuff like that, and individual roles may or may not succeed. But your group is trying to succeed at this encounter as a whole. Okay, everybody's roles are going into into a pool essentially, and remember that partial success is a viable option. Not everybody needs to succeed at their role, and if maybe not everyone passes their check, maybe the weapon gets forged, but the enchantment didn't take.
Mm-hmm.
Now you've got a perfectly viable enchantable sword that doesn't have an enchantment on it. You just got to retry that part.
Yep.
Maybe the thief escaped, but the party gains valuable clues into seeing where he went into hiding.
I like
or
that.
Perhaps in the skirmish of it all, he dropped a valuable clue as to who he was working for.
I love those ideas.
Maybe building the base camp isn't 100% secure, but at least it'll count as shelter.
Mm-hmm.
Even if the walls aren't completely built and will keep things out,
Yep.
Maybe the ship reaches its destination safely, but the crew is exhausted after from rations or seasickness, because everything didn't quite go as planned. Generally, if half or more of your players succeed, the encounter should have some tangible success condition to it.
I agree.
You worked for it. You succeeded at least mostly. Give it to them,
Yep.
And some success can mitigate failure as well. So if you still get less than half, but at least some of your party members succeed, maybe dampen the consequences due to that one player's success.
Yeah.
It makes the players feel less helpless, and the player who succeeded has at least something to show for their efforts.
Very good idea.
So
I agree.
All right, thus endeth the lesson.
Yes. Let's get some questions before we run out of time here.
All right.
So this is Knox who said this one. What happens when we combine environmental and extended encounters, a chasing a thief through a swampland? Do you choose one story mechanic over the other to focus on, or engage it as a super difficult marriage of two? I don't necessarily say that it has to be super difficult, but I do think it should be a marriage of the two.
It's definitely a marriage of the two. I think you concentrate on the chasing the thief, because that's the most dynamic aspect of it. The swamp is just kind of there.
It's still part of the scene. I think it's the breathing part of the scene, but it is still part of the extended scene.
Yes, it definitely makes a complication. So yeah, I would say focus on the thief and complicate it with the swamp, much like you would for a combat encounter.
Yep. But beyond that, I said I wouldn't overcomplicate it or make it super difficult unless there was a necessity for it, meaning like the players were hunting someone down, and that person definitely would not be someone who wanted to be caught.
Yeah.
Then I might add some levels of difficulty with the environment. So.
All right. So Overwatch. Overwatch asks, there's a history of iconic environmental and extended encounters. The Dead Marshes. The whole planet from Pitch Black, excellent one. The Bog of Eternal Stench.
Yeah, nice one.
A MacGyver building scene.
Oh, yeah.
Are there any tricks to really making tabletop encounters like that memorable for the players? I think we talked about a lot of them
definitely.
already. I think what each one of these that you've listed before, the Dead Marshes, the planet from Pitch Black, the Bog of Eternal Stench, I think the things that those all have in common is that they're some sort of a mundane environment that's taken to some level of an extreme. Okay. One of the tips that we provided earlier tonight was make them suitably epic.
Yes.
Snowfall isn't a problem. A blizzard in a mountain pass is a problem.
Yeah, to take it up a notch. And again, it doesn't have to be a deadly blizzard, but it's a blizzard which cuts down vision or it cuts down sound. All those things. Affect the senses. That is one of the first things you can do is affect the senses. 2, if it needs to be scary, make it scary or make it bright or make it put something to an extreme. Even if they're at a simple thing, like you don't necessarily have to be something really challenging, but if there's a thief in a crowd that is a crowd of people at a carnival, that's different. It's there's a lot of liveliness going on around them and movement, and that makes for a lot of distraction.
Yep.
And makes it hard to track somebody.
Yep. I think the thing that I'm noticing about all the things that you've listed here is that there's something taken to the extreme, like the Dead Marshes. That's Lord of the Rings, right?
Correct.
Okay, so I just want to make sure I was thinking of the correct
I think
Dead
that's
Marshes.
the one he's speaking of. Yes.
So what is that? That's a swamp, but it's a swamp filled with hungry spirits. Okay, and if you stray off the path, they eat you.
Yes.
Okay, the whole planet from Pitch Black. What's the complication? Darkness.
It's a bit more than just darkness, but
the darkness is filled with horrible carnivorous monsters. So
because
again,
that's when they hunt.
Exactly.
That's when it's safe to hunt. Yeah.
So you've got to come up with some interesting things to combat not only your ability to not see, but if you fail at that, there are dire consequences.
Yeah.
Bog of Eternal Stench. Again, it's a swamp, but there are, I would say, lasting consequences.
If you dip one toe in it, you will stink for an eternity.
Exactly. Smell bad.
Exactly. Everybody knows about it, too.
Yep.
That's the other thing about these things is make it iconic by giving everybody a bit of knowledge about it. I watched somebody one time hand out 3x5 cards before a scene about something, so everyone knew something secret about it, a little rumor or something.
That's great. That's a great idea, actually.
Yeah, so they can bring it up in-game.
Yep.
MacGyver building scenes are another one like that, is that you bring up random things out of packs that have meaning. So that's another good way of doing it. So, but yeah, memorable is senses, memorable is extremes, memorable is simplicity. Making something visually simplistic and leaning into it,
and it makes the stakes of the encounter very clear to your players. So it's not just, oh, you're in the darkness, great, now what? Well, there are carnivorous beasts in the darkness, so good luck with that.
Yep. So next week's topic, we are going to be talking about a Halloween topic, which is using props to enhance your storytelling.
Yep.
So using music, using candles, having things around with you. So.
Oh, yeah, I got a lot of ideas on this one. So you can find us on Twitter at @ST_Conclave. You can find us up on Instagram, also at ST_Conclave. Listen to us live every Wednesday night at 7 p.m. Eastern Time on mixlr.com/storyteller-conclave. And once again, please feel free to join us up on our Discord. You can find the link to that up at our website, storytellerconclave.com. And we also tweet it out pretty regularly, so you can find it on our Twitter feed as well.
We'd like to thank our Patreon members, especially our name members, Knox in the Box, Sam, the Arcane Asylum, and Sparkle Motion. You guys help us every week with keeping the show up, and we love it. Our pre-show music today, again, was by Arcane Anthems. You can find them at patreon.com/arcaneanthems. I will be putting the list up with the show tonight, so you guys can catch that. Our intro music is Beyond the Warriors by Guy Frog. You can find that at guyfrogmusic.weebly.com. And our outro music is Only Our Footprints in the Sand by Midair Machine. You can find that at soundcloud.com/midairmachines/tracks.
And lastly, a big shout out to our families, Vicky and Sean, all of our friends who've sat with us at our games, at our game tables over the years and given us these great experiences to share with you.
Yes.
And you, all of our listeners, we love you, every single one of you. Thank you.
Love
Good
you.
night.
Good night.